What tips would you offer women entrepreneurs who are considering sourcing venture on that basis? What would you suggest if you were giving someone advice?
I would think long and hard before jumping into a new venture. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Yes.
You take a lot of you take a big social risk,
Yes.
which I think is a more difficult thing for the women entrepreneurs than for the men entrepreneurs for some reason. Maybe that's one of the things we can get rid of.
Yeah.
Is that the women are more sensitive to what their peers think of them, and an entrepreneur has to be completely insensitive
Yes.
to that. They have to have this vision, and it has to drive them, and that's all that matters. So I think that will be a really strong and helpful piece to solve somehow in our social structure.
Yes.
For an entrepreneur has to look at people as very much they are all different, not we are all the same.
Yes. Okay.
There has to be that kind of a feeling.
Okay.
And if you're an entrepreneur, it's a long struggle. So it has to be a strong-hearted woman too, who just says, "This is what I'm going to do, and nothing's going to stop me."
Yes.
And I'm going to be broke and eating peanut butter for 5 or 10 years.
Yes.
And at the end of all that, I will have shown the world something new that they wouldn't have seen before. So I think that would be a good thing. Once they've decided to do it,
Yes.
I think women should. It's really interesting. Women are really good managers.
Yes.
People love working for women.
Yes.
That is very exciting. Very exciting for people to work for women.
Yes.
Women somehow are able to attract teams that are very driven, and I think that's that they are willing to subvert their ego and allow other egos to shine, and I think that's a really promising thing.
Yes.
And so we do have a lot of good successful management women. That is definitely the case.
Yes.
Though there are a very few women who have that sort of the entrepreneurial bug that is, I have to do this and I will break down every wall to do it.
Yes.
I will, if there's a law there, I'll get it changed. If there's if people think this is wrong, I'll make them believe it's right. If it's so that kind of thing does not come easy for a lot of women. For some women, it's terrific and they go after it. But they have to be willing to say, these walls are not the walls.
And do you think that's something that could be learned? Like, do you think that that's something that could be changed? If what you're saying is there's very few women that'll have that ability.
Yeah, I think it can change, and it is changing very quickly.
Right.
And I think a big part of it is women's sports. Because women now are in the sporting world. They're a lot more than they were a generation ago.
Yes.
And I think that's a real positive because women's sports are allow people to understand what it's like to lose, understand what it's like to win, understand what it's like to lose big, and what it's like to win big.
Yes.
And I think that is a real. It will really help women understand what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship, in some ways, is you're on a losing team and you're taking on the champions.
Yes.
And you beat them.
Yes. Yes. Against all odds. And I think you're spot on there because I've had a woman venture capitalist and a woman entrepreneur, CEO, say exactly the same thing, that it was because they'd use the metaphor of sports, but they both were sportswomen in different areas. So I think you've got...
It helps people feel okay about failure.
And also it must also break the psyche into that territory so that it's comfortable. Because I remember the CEO, the woman's founder, saying that, you know, she was comfortable in this skin as an entrepreneur because of sport.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So team sports, I think, more important than individual sports for that kind of thing, because you need to work, you need to understand how to work as a team, and you need to know how to take failure and realize that there's another game next Saturday.
Yeah, fascinating, fantastic. Thanks so much. I noted in a recent article in Mercury News, grim numbers point to the end of venture capital era in the game of venture capital. The 10-year return on investments is one of the most closely watched benchmarks of performance. Everyone can have a bad year here or there, and in the short run there's always going to be sluggishness from an economic downturn or two, but none of those excuses can explain away a whole decade of failure. No, there's something bigger going on. The venture industry is in free fall. And that has big implications for the Silicon Valley economy, especially when it comes to job creation. So with all those negativities out there in the global economic environment, obviously in Europe it's even worse, possibly starting to affect investment and the focus changing to become more risk averse, will we see even more women startups sidelined for male startups? Obviously not in your firm, but this fear has actually been expressed to me by women venture capitalists and also women CEOs. So that's the reason I asked the question.
Well, there's a bigger problem, and that is that that our regulators, our government, has made it more and more difficult for venture capitalists, because all the regulations they put on big companies, they also put on companies that are just getting going, if they're going to be public. And so what we've had is a whole decade, or it's really been since Sarbanes-Oxley, 2003, where we aren't able to really get any of our companies public. And if you can't get your company public, then you can't get your money back to your investor, and your investor doesn't want to put more money into you.
Yeah.
And so there isn't an opportunity to keep that virtuous cycle going.
Yes.
I think, you know, and it's only getting worse. The regulations are going to increase with this new administration, at least that's the talk.
Right.
So we're very concerned, and we think that the venture capital business is in some hot water.
Okay.
Now, it is somewhat cyclical, but they're 10 or 15-year cycles, so it may be a while before we really have another good run.
Okay.
And it is true that when things are tighter, people take fewer risks, and they may say that there's a larger risk to a woman entrepreneur than a man entrepreneur. I'm not sure that's true, and I'm not sure anybody actually believes that anymore. So I think your question is probably not relevant.
Okay, that's good. That's
I
good
think
news.
it's more the industry as a whole is in more trouble because of the heavy regulation that's been put on us. In the U.S., it's interesting. The rest of the world, the entrepreneurship is thriving, and both women and men. Interesting. China has a lot of female entrepreneurs.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah.
And so, just as an add-on to that, a few super angels or angels have been blogging recently in the last few months about you know, that the venture industry has to change, and I'm wondering, do you think, with the perspective you've just shared with me, do you think that all the creativity that you guys deal with, both for yourselves and with the entrepreneurs that you're dealing with, that you could rethink the venture industry and make it work better?
I've been trying to constantly reinvent the venture business, and every time I try, I realize that my investors, the limited partners, do not want it to change much. They are very cautious, particularly now. They're very cautious about putting money out, and in putting money out in any new way with any new setup is very scary for them. So it's much less likely for us to raise money with another construct. Now that said, yes, I think it is time, and there are some companies that are starting to change the nature of venture capital so that shareholders don't have to hold on for 12 years before they get any liquidity.
Okay.
They'll be able to pass the baton
Yeah.
to other shareholders as
Yeah.
they go.
Yeah, wow, thank you. Often advice for sourcing venture is equated with dating, and you may or may not know my background is in the online dating industry.
Oh, really?
I was a
That's great.
matchmaker, implying that there's a matching that needs to happen with entrepreneur and investor. Have you noticed a general psychological profile of venture capitalists and also of entrepreneurs that promotes the attraction and synergy between them to develop a great startup?
I don't think so, because I think venture capitalists and entrepreneurs everywhere are so different from one another.
Okay.
The entrepreneurs have one thing in common, that is the need to make a big change in the world.
Yes.
And venture capitalists are of all ilks.
Okay.
Some of them want what the entrepreneurs want. Some are more interested in money, or resources, or industries, or technology, or markets, whatever. It's a wide variety of people.
So you've never noticed a pattern there?
Nah.
Fair enough. In the dance with the entrepreneur, both in the decision-making process of funding a startup and then in working with those startups, what are the necessary qualities that make a good venture capitalist? I've had two modes of operandus fed back to me by venture capitalists. Would you trust your gut instincts and feelings that happen within the relationship with the entrepreneur as signs about what's happening in the business or the startup? Or would you manage by influence or persuasion? They're two modes that people have told me about. I just wondered what
Well,
your
actually,
mode would
the
be.
two that I've seen are more both of those
Yes.
in one category. The using persuasion and and looking with faith in the entrepreneur and relationship with the entrepreneur.
Yes.
I think the other venture capitalists are focused really on performance. Have you performed? Are your numbers proper? Are you doing these things the right way? And have you hit your milestones? So that's one type of venture capitalist. And another type is really the relationship venture capitalist. The connector connects entrepreneurs to a lot of different areas. The creative piece that a venture capitalist brings to the table, because they've seen so many things. There's a little more interesting creativity to that.
Yes.
So I think there are kind of those two types.
Thank you for that. And as a pathfinder yourself, what would your main modus operandus be in working with an entrepreneur?
I tend to really look for really good management, and if I have really good management in place, then I can sleep at night. And then I also want to build a good relationship so that I can help those entrepreneurs when they need it.
Right.
If they need a particular introduction, or they need a little judgment on how they're going to market their service or whatever.
Great, so a connector.
Great.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. I'm
Yeah,
getting cold
appreciate
here.
it.